Okay, so welcome to Module 2, our Module 2 lesson, I should say. And here we will really get into shared reading and talk about some of our strategies that we think will be able to help you read with your child in a way that promotes further language and literacy development. Okay, so first let's get this out of the way. What is shared reading? I've been talking about it a lot, but what does it really mean? And when we say shared reading, we mean an interaction between a child and adult when reading a book together, and all that entails. Shared reading has been labeled the single most important activity for building knowledge required for success in reading. And so it promotes a variety of child outcomes, including language, vocabulary, and knowledge of books and print that are necessary for kids to continue to learn to read. Okay. However, the gains in children's language and literacy skill, does not just depend on the amount of time they spend reading with a parent or with an adult, but instead how we engage in those behaviors. And so one specific strategy for reading with our children that is well researched is something called dialogic reading, which is the focus of our modules. Dialogic reading is a strategy where an adult asks specific prompts to encourage children to engage in the story and talk about the pictures and the vocabulary and things like that. And they really shift from being just a listener to the story, like a parent or a caregiver, an adult just reading to the child being an active storyteller themselves and really taking on more of that role. So lots of research on dialogic reading shows that it promotes early reading skills, kind of maybe letter sound correspondence, phonological awareness, and things like that kind of build later reading ability. It also promotes language skills, both receptively, their understanding of language, and their expressive skills, or how well they can communicate parts of a story and things like that, as well as just vocabulary. Dialogic reading also promotes, it's also been shown that when parents engage in dialogic reading when a child is younger, it kind of relates to reading skill later in life, as well as vocabulary gains. Children are exposed to unique vocabulary and when they read compared to just in everyday life, right? We read about different situations and stories and use different language when we're reading than when we're just talking. So kind of exposing children to more books and reading in this way leads to vocabulary gains as well. Okay, so dialogic reading consists of a couple acronyms that will help us remember specific strategies down the line. And the first one is PEER. So we really want to prompt, so P-E-E-R, P-E-E-R. I don't know if I said three E's, I mean. So for the first P is to prompt. So we're going to prompt a child to participate in reading by asking a question or giving them some kind of opportunity. So we're going to stop reading and kind of engage the child here. And that's what that first P stands for. Okay. The second E stands for evaluating the child's answer. So we give them that prompt and they respond in some way. So we evaluate whether that's correct or incorrect, or if they're close, or however we're going to evaluate that. And then that second E is to expand on the child's utterance. So we're going to provide some little extra information, whether they got it right or wrong. We're going to kind of build on that language that they're using so that they get a good model, a good example of some more complex language they can use the next time we ask them a prompt, and hopefully they can use without us prompting at all. Okay, and that R stands for repeating the prompt to give the child another chance to recite the response. So just to maybe, after we give them that little extra information, and when we expand on the child's utterance, maybe if we ask the question again, they'll kind of incorporate some of that into their answer, and that kind of builds language skill. Okay. So we will, when we're talking about prompts and what kind of questions to ask, we will talk about specific types of questions in modules 3 and 4. But here we're just focused on peer as a whole, okay, and not the specific prompts we use. But it's important to note the goal, and when we use peer, is to just maximize interaction and engagement during our time reading together. We don't want, again, to be like a passive experience where a child is just listening. We really want to kind of focus on bringing the interaction, getting the kid talking, getting the kid interested while we read together. Okay, so now we're going to break down each step individually so that we get a better, hopefully a more clear example, understanding of what's going on in each one of these steps. So for prompt, like we said, during reading, we're really going to stop at different times throughout the story, throughout our time together, and really get the child involved. So again, we'll talk about specific prompts. That'll be the focus of modules 3 and 4. For now, some examples include like, you could stop and say, well, what is that thing you're pointing to a picture? Or you can just ask child to tell me what's happening in this picture. Another example of a prompt could be, it's called a completion prompt, where they say the boy, you kind of say, oh, the boy's bouncing a pause, and let the child kind of fill that in. As well as questions like, who went to the circus? And have you ever gone to the circus? Things like that. Those are some examples of prompts we can use in that first P in peer. Okay, so the next stage is to evaluate, and this is pretty simple. After we prompt the child, we're gonna and the child responds back to us, we're gonna provide information on whether that response was correct or incorrect, right? Sometimes that'll be more clear. There'll be very clear correct or incorrect answers, like that's, that is a dog, or that's not a dog. But other times it will be, if you're asking more of an open-ended question, they're talking about themselves or something like that, then we're just going to kind of tell her, great job for responding. Okay, so as you can see, yes, great job, that's right, or close, or not quite. These are some examples of evaluating a child's response. Next, we're going to expand. So we're going to provide the child with a model of correct and more complex language by adding to the child's response. So if we ask the child, what is that? And they said, ball, say, that's great. And then we'll expand on it saying, yeah, that's a big red ball. Just kind of getting the child exposed to more longer sentences, more complicated language. Or if you asked, a child, what's going on? What's going on in this picture? And then, they say, oh, jump. You say, oh yeah, the man jumped high on the trampoline. All right, that's one way we would expand on that and get the child exposed to more language. And then again, if we ask the child a personal question like, oh, have you ever gone to the circus? And, they responded in whatever way, we could say, oh yeah, you went to the circus when you were 3 years old. That's a way of kind of building that language skill by expanding their exposure to more complicated language. All right, so the final step in the R and peer is to repeat or revisit, which we're going to provide the child with the initial question again, the same question we asked in the beginning. We're just going to give it to them again and encourage the child to use some of that new language and information you provided. So you already asked, well, what is this thing? And gave them the expanded response. You said, that's a big red ball. And then so you can ask, so what's that thing? Things like that. And here I've listed more examples as well for you to reference later if you want. Okay, so other things I think are important to know when we're reading with our children. It's always good to give some choice, give the child some choice. So we can offer 2 book choices. So we'll ask you in this study to offer some of the books that we provided to you, but you're going to offer 2 book choices, and it's very much okay to read the same book. I think you'll find that children are inclined to do that, and that's it's a good thing because we can work on building on that same little knowledge. So if we as children get more familiar with the story and with the pictures and with the vocabulary, we can start to ask more complicated questions. Whereas if we started talking about a completely different book and completely different topic, we might have to target some basic vocabulary first, get familiar with the story, with the characters, and then we can start adding. But it's okay to read that same book multiple times. Okay. Something else we want to do is we want to make sure we sit in a comfortable and distraction-free area. We want to keep it away from TVs and lots of distractions if that's at all possible. Okay. And also before we read, we will always want to kind of reiterate the title and the author of the book. Those are important elements of print, and that builds future knowledge as well when children start reading on their own. Okay. So during reading, some things to know is to keep reading fun and engaging and exciting. We really want to, it's not a classroom, we don't want to make it some sterile kind of thing that everyone does not like to do, but we want to make it fun, interactive experience. Okay. And we also want to, when children's attention just naturally drifts as it does, we want to use attention getters when needed. We can use some funny voices. We can, add noises and sound effects, and you know what motivates your child. So you can use those kind of things to bring them back in when you feel like maybe they're just kind of losing interest, which will happen. Okay. And the last thing is we really want to try to use peer to prompt interactions throughout the story. Okay. And after reading, you can give them a all done or the end, so the child knows that we're good to go. And then always, try to thank the child for reading with you, kind of create that motivation and make sure they know they're appreciated, because it's hopefully a great experience for both you and your child. Any questions? Thank you.